Abraham. Okay, first convert. Then you have Isaac. You have Ishmael. But if you want to go off a color thing, that's obviously being shown to you that that does not matter. Whether it's white, black. If you say Abraham Avinu is a white person, you say he's a black person, you say he's whatever. Both his sons were the same color as he was, but one was chosen and one wasn't because of the spiritual dexterity that they have. That's it. It's not the color. It's like, come on, what are we talking about? Like, him made it very clear there ain't no, there's no shape, no body, no limit, nothing. It's all about the neshama. It's all about the neshama.
You
You
know,
know.
but you brought out something right now that it really just hit me like in a new way. You said Abraham Avinu, which is 100% true, and it's the Masorah. Abraham Avinu was the first convert,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, like when you hear that, you think, okay, but like if he converted, that implies that there was something prior.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like it implies that it was something prior,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we do the Masorah. The tradition does teach that he went and learned with in the yeshiva was a Shaman Aver, right? Where Shem, Noach's son, was was there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean? What does that mean that Abraham was the first convert? Because the Midrashim talk about the lineage from Adam Rishon and Enoch all the way to to Noah, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a lineage from Noah that that's like 10 generations of men, like Limerick and all these different types of people, right? Was maybe that was before.
From because 26 from Adam Rishon to Abraham Avinu.
26 from Adam Rishon to
Uh,
Moshe.
oh, it's 26 from Adam to Moshe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Is
yeah.
it 15 from Adam to Abraham?
No, it's 10. It's 10. It's
10.
from Noah. It's in your Midrash says
Yeah, yeah.
Bereshit, but from Abraham to from Adam to Noah is 10 generations, and from Noah to Abraham is 10 generations.
Mm.
From Adam, so it's 2020, and then from Abraham to Moshe is 6 generations. So that's where that 26 comes from.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But the point is just saying that it implies that that lineage from Adam to Noah and Noah to his descendants, that it implies that Abraham was not a part of that, but rather he converted into it.
Okay.
That's what it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you say Abraham's the first convert, what do you mean he's the first convert? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean? You don't say Adam is the first convert, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? He acknowledged God, right? So it's not like the acknowledging of the God makes a person a convert, right? So it's not like he's a convert because he accepted one God, right? But rather it's saying that there was an existing belief system, and we see it. But I never really looked at it that way until you just said that right now, right? Which is the idea of to say that, like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. That um, um, it makes total sense that he's a convert, like, and what he's converting into that lineage from from Adam to Noah, Noah to, that's what he converted into, right? Because it's not like he created something new that never existed. That's the point of him being a convert,
Mm-hmm.
right? Anyways, just it was an interesting thought. So we're back in Mesillat Yasharim, and we're on this idea of really cultivating and really looking at our habits. I mean, I really thought so much about myself, learning the safer, such a different experience learning it, with you right now than it did, years ago in yeshiva. Yeshiva's like, yeah, it's a Musa safer. Yeah, we got to get back. But it's so much focus in that area. You kind of like maybe like not take it as serious as you maybe should, right? Because you're so focused on like learning Gemara and all this type of stuff and all the big Rabbanon and, anyways. But now I'm like here and I'm like more clear and more developed, and I see like how big the stuff is, and you have to constantly read the Sefer and critique yourself. The Sefer reminds, because if we go back to the beginning of the Sefer, the Ramchal talks about these ideas of true love, true connection to Hashem, true patience, true giving, true forgiving. All these things are attributes we have to obtain,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we attain those things through our behavior, through our midot, right? And these are things that these are energies. These aren't like say a mitzvah, like say like okay, I did the mitzvah bakar mazon. Okay, you did the mitzvah, very good, right? But he's talking about qualities that make us complete. Qualities of behavior, qualities of living. That's not necessarily a mitzvah. A mitzvah connects you to the life force of the Creator, which vitalizes your whole internal self. But the focus on your behavior and how you view things and your intentions, right? That's the vibration you give off on a moment to moment basis, which creates affinity, right? Like so you have this affinity of energies that exist around you, but you have to draw them into you. It's like a person goes fishing, right? And they want to acquire a fish, right? And the same way you want to acquire energy, well, you have to have, certain things attached to you, right? It's not like you just could go in there and grab patience, or grab unconditional love or grab any of those things, but rather you have to arouse and draw. And so that's what the behavior does. So with that being said, we're in the concept of path of the just, and Ramchal, please join us if you want. Okay, so let's go a little bit back before, and I want to say, this learning should go in the merit of all the people who are going through times, of say concealment, the presentation of darkness in this light of this Torah we learn together should be a, I don't know if the word is refuah, but it should be a chizuk, to be able to endure, the situation. Okay, so he says like this. He says, "Sheli shaleme hada'at tehaya ha'ar mitzad." So he says like this: those whose wholeness of understanding will be roused to zeal by their sense of duty and by the great worth and importance of the deeds. Leha Pikutim Mehem Mitzah Ha'olam Haba Ukevodod. So he says, okay, so the wholeness is those of wholeness, right? People who are complete, wholeness of understanding will be aroused to zeal. They'll know, they'll just like, it's just like, it's like you see these guys, these business guys. This is, I remember one time, years ago, like I had when I was really young, I was really into like concerts and these types of things. So, anyways, I threw a concert years ago, in Kansas City, if you can imagine, and it was with Ludacris and Mystical. It was a time when Ludacris was at like his apex, and Mystical was always big in this, in that like Midwest type of side, But anyways, long story short, so I met all these random characters, right? And so this guy is random, kind of like, in the concert business, you meet all the street guys, like no matter where you at, like anyone where all the street guys are around, because it's like cash, it's a cash business, right? So any state you go in, any city you go in, you're gonna meet a cast of characters that are connected to the radio stations or connected to promotion teams and connected to clubs and all the things connected to clubs, like you always meet these guys. So this one random guy, who was like a toll street guy, but he was one of the main promoters there. So anyway, somehow he got my number. We started talking, and he used to call me every morning. He used to be like, "The early bird get the worm. The early bird get the worm." I was like, "Dude, is this guy serious?" Like, I'm from LA, bro. Like, you know what I mean? Like, LA, you wake up when you wake up. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, if you have something to do, you got an alarm. But in general, he early bird get the worm, and I just never forgot that. But he's saying like, so a person who those who are those of wholeness of understanding will understand zeal by their sense of duty and by their great worth and importance of deeds. He says, "Leha pikutim mehem mitzad haolam haba ubekavod." So he says, and those of lesser understanding from matters of the world to come and honor, so that they do not have so they do not suffer shame in the day of reward, in seeing the good he could have obtained but lost it. So he's saying, like, he's ending this last chapter. This is what we stopped off last time, and basically saying, like, like, we look at this world and we just see all these concepts, and we have this body, right? And this body and all these concepts responds. Like, sometimes the body responds with fear, right? Like, sometimes the body tense up, right? That's not the neshama, that's the body, right? And we have time with the body lust, and we have all these experiences. And the thing is, it's saying, like, hey, you know what? Um, you know, a person should lose track of this lifetime, because we're just here to serve Hashem. Like, it's nothing that you can ask for. I've said this before, but Rabbi Breitowitz, who's a rabbi or Samak, I remember he said one time on Shabbat, he says, like, everything, every dream, your greatest dream that you can have for yourself in your life is only an opportunity to do mitzvahs. So, like, say a guy says, hey, I want to be, very wealthy, right? But the only way that wealth can do anything for him is if he does mitzvahs with it, right? He could do the body. He could eat tons of food. He could have the best wines. He could, have the best sugars and flours and this, but none of it would do anything on his deathbed. That momentary pleasure would do nothing for him on his deathbed, right? Or when he's buried in the ground. None of that. The only thing that's going to matter when he's on his deathbed is how much of that money he used to help other people. That's it. A person says he wants, I want to marry the most beautiful, holy girl ever in the world. Okay, very nice. Better that than a girl who denies God, right? A woman who's a harlot, God forbid. Better desire the Eshes Chayil than the other side, right? And so from that perspective, right? From that perspective, from that perspective, when you look at it, like, when you look at it, it's like, okay, so a guy wants the most beautiful girl. Okay, what's the most beautiful girl? So why is one the most beautiful girl? Okay, in the whole thing, because maybe he's more attracted to her, he's more aroused, all these things. But the point is, he's going to give her more love. That help arouse him to be more of a giver, to be more of a sharer, right? That's all it does. A girl with that's all it is, right? Or say, like, a person says, hey, he wants to be the biggest Torah scholar. I want to be the biggest Torah scholar, right? Okay, great. You can do more mitzvahs. Everything is mitzvahs. Everything's mitzvahs, because we're not looking at life just in this world. We're looking at this world and the world to come, right? We're not packing luggage just for going to Detroit, you know, or Michigan. No, we're packing to go all the way around the world, right? To circle the whole galaxy, right? So the only packaging we could take with us is mitzvahs. Right now, we're doing the mitzvahs. We're taking time. We're saying, Hashem, Rabbanu Shalom, we love you. We want to learn your Torah. We want to elevate ourselves. So we're doing the mitzvah. So he's saying here that, God forbid, we forget that point. We forget that point, that the only thing that we could take with us is our mitzvahs. And life is guaranteed going to end. It's guaranteed going to end. So the only thing we have is mitzvahs, right? And so the idea of the mitzvahs is to say that he's saying that, God forbid, you get into the world and you miss out on the mitzvahs you're supposed to do, and you won't have a vessel to truly connect to God, and you'll stand in front of Hashem ashamed, right? Okay, so that's what he ends last chapter with. So he says, mas si dai ha'azreyut vehar ta hamen hine mas sorry mafside he's rezut. He's rezut. Okay. Okay, the factors which, so he's starting chapter 9. So he says the factors which diminish zeal are those which increase laziness. Ooh, I saw a little bit of this before we started class. I was like, yikes. Okay, so the greatest of them all is seeking tranquility of the body. Oh man, he's getting us. Hate, hating of exertion and the love of body enjoyments to their fullest extent. Oh man, I can relate to this. This is so me right here. Ki hine adam kaze ve'dai sheti kabed alav ha'avoda lifnei bore od koved gadol. So he says, for behold, to a man like this, the service of God will certainly weigh very heavily upon him. For for one who wishes to eat his meal with full peace and tranquility, to sleep without any disturbance, to walk only at his own leisure, place, or similar things. Undoubtedly, he will be very difficult for him to rise early for synagogue or to cut his meal short, or so as to pray in the afternoon, or to go out to perform a mitzvah in a time is not convenient for him. So how much more so to hurry himself to perform a mitzvah or to study Torah? Oh man, it's tough. You know, it's a real thing, and I think it's like that American thing, man. To be honest with you, like yeah, I'm just saying I'm not blaming the country, but maybe I won't say America. It's a California, it's a LA thing. We just wait for stuff. I don't know. I feel like I could be much more zealot in certain things. I do. I mean, everything I'm with Kavana. I mean, you should. It's heavy, But even now, I'm saying I could push myself. I could push myself to have even more zeal for things. You know what I mean? But I jump out of the bed. I'm in it first thing in the morning. I'm battling. I know where the war's at. But there's even more zeal. There's even more zeal I can do. And I ask Hashem, now that you're opening my eyes, the things, please give me core, please give me strength to have more zeal, to be able to push through limitations and to be able to achieve my potential through mercy. So he says, Umi she margila asmoda lemin hagot ha'ele. Einenu adona be asmoda le asoda hekef, hefek ze. One who habituates himself in these practices is not master over himself to do the opposite of the wishes of the wishes of things when he wishes, for he will already imprison for his will is already imprisoned in the prison of habit and has become second nature to him. God forbid. Ve asmana sarika sheyada ha'adam kilo amalimu leminucha hu ba'olam hazeh. So he says, and the man needs to realize that he was not placed in the world for tranquility, but for rather the toil and for exertion. And he must conduct himself only as the laborers who perform work for their employees, similar to what was said, we are day laborers, and in the manner of soldiers in the world formations who eat swiftly and sleep irregularly, always ready to engage in battle. Okay. A man needs to realize that he was not placed in this world for tranquility. Okay. So it's an interesting thing. Why is that an interesting thing? Because the first thing God tells Adam Rishon to do when he comes into the Garden of Eden, toil the field. And the sages derive from that, learn Torah. But the point is just saying this is the idea on the most simple Peshat level, that man's introduction into the Garden of Eden. But first of all, he was placed there. So where was he prior? And he was placed there and so he was placed there, and so from that space, God immediately told him to labor, right? And to guard, right? And so he said this is the point. He said the person must conduct himself only as laborers who perform work for their employees, similar to what is said, what was said, we are laborers. Okay, in the manner of soldiers in their war formations will eat swiftly and sleep irregularly and always ready to engage in battle. So he says, "Ve'al ne'amar ki adam le'amala yulad ukeshare gil asmo da al ze. And so he brings a safer, he brings Iyub, right? And Iyub says, man was born to toil. He says, when a man habituates himself in the manner, he is certainly fine. He will certainly find the service of God easy, since he does not lack the preparation readiness for it. For all of these lines of sages of blessed memory, this is the way. This is the way to Torah. Eat bread with salt, drink water in small measures, and sleep on the ground. Hey, I haven't made it to that level, but I know people who have. And he says, which is a general statement of distancing to the utmost extreme from the comforts and pleasures. Od mimafaside azri zudhu rava hapechad vegado. So he says another factor which diminishes zeal is a great fear and apprehension of what the future may bring, so that sometimes one may fear the cold or the heat, other times mishaps or illness, other times from the wind, and so forth and forth. This is what Shlomo, peace be upon him, said. The lazy one, he says, the lazy one there is a lion in the way. A lion is amongst the streets. Okay, so let's go. So he says another thing that diminishes zeal, right? So the first thing was like people who are overly indulgent in physicality, right? People who, you know, you know, they're people who they're couch potatoes. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the bottom line. They're couch potatoes, and they don't like to do anything, and and they don't like to move. He says it's harder for those people to be in a place of zeal. You know what I'm saying? For these reasons. And he says another factor which diminishes zeal is a great fear of is great fear and apprehension of what the future may bring. So so some people like they freak themselves out, right? They freak themselves out, and they freak themselves out, and they freak themselves out, and they create stories about things and what could happen, what could go wrong, and all this and all this, and they end up paralyzing themselves with fear. So he said these types of people. Right? If I go here, maybe I don't do that. And everyone has those moments too. Like it's not like you have to be that has to be your full personality type, but you can say, well, what if I go? Like I went to the Temple Mount today, right? And I'm thinking like, well, is it good to go? Like maybe there's like could be some drama, some violence, who knows? This whole type of thing, right? And so the thing is saying that like, what am I thinking that about? Like, we're in a temple, I'm doing mitzvah. Like, come on. He says var gi ginu chachamim uzikaronam lebracha mahamida hazot. So he says the sages already denigrated this trait and attributed it to the sinners, which many verses support them as the sinners of Zion are afraid, trembling as seized in flatterers. One of the great sages noticed upon his discipline, one of his noticing his discipline, one of noticing his discipline, afraid, and said to him, "You are a sinner." Now, it's an interesting idea of the idea of fear, right? Because you think about like most of the time, fear, and the fear he's talking about is this fear of something that did not manifest. but you could convince yourself of that's happening currently. And I have a friend of mine who's a trauma specialist. I have a friend who's a trauma specialist, and I have a friend who's a trauma specialist, and um, and he said the thing about trauma is that the person perceives that experience that happened at a particular moment in their life happening in that current section at that moment. So they could have experienced this traumatic experience, which is basically an experience that they couldn't understand why it happened, right? So normally when people go to therapy, they're able to work out why things happen, which removes this kind of like inner confusion that that experience caused inside of a person, right? And so if they don't deal with that, right, they can have experiences in their life and say, wow, this really triggered me. What does that mean a person's triggered? It means is that that traumatic experience that you had is still in your mind, and there in this situation is inducing the perception that that same pain that was experienced in the past could happen again here currently. But these are two different situations, right? So people keep on recreating that. So it says Ella Alze Naamar. So he says on this scripture, and he says on Jesus on this scripture says, trust in God and do and do good well do it says and do good dwell in the land and be nourished by faith. And so he says, Kalo shel daver surika sheyashim ha'adam et asmot ma'arei be'olam be'kavua be'avoda. So he says, and he says the similarity of the matter is that a man must make himself um, identical in worldly matters, but fixed in a okay. So he's engaged in worldly matters, but he has but fix a service of God and be content and selfish with all in all worldly matters with whatever comes to him. Okay, so there's understanding. Okay, the summary of the matter is that a man must make himself I can say as well, in worldly matters, but fixed in the service of God. Be content and satisfied in all worldly matters with whatever comes to him, taking what comes to hand. Be fair from rest, be far from rest and close to toil and exertion. His heart, his heart trusting securely in God and not fearing the future and whatever mishaps it may bring. So that's the thing. The thing is like this: if somebody comes into your office and says, "Hey, I have $1 million check, but I'm not going to give it to you," you have to ask yourself, why did that person come into the office? So he's not going to give it to me. So why do I have to have this experience? Why do I have the experience of someone coming to me and bringing me something that I can't, or bringing something that I cannot have, right? And so a person could look back at it, a spiritual person could look back, especially if they're reading it as a book, and say, well, maybe you could learn that when you're in the path of righteousness, the only thing that you can get is the right thing, right? The right situation. Where you're working at is a right place to be working at, right? The people that you're dealing with are the right people to be dealing with. The people that are engaged, whatever, this is the right people because you're on the path of God. Now, if you're out, doing trickery, you're out, being dishonest, you're out, just doing the wrong thing, the opposite of what God wants us to do. How do you know the things that you have are not going to bring you more suffering? And in fact, they're going to. That you can't get away from it. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't get away from it. You can't go over there and steal and then go and buy a house for your family. You know what I'm saying? Like it just doesn't work that way. Okay, people make mistakes; they didn't know. Okay, fine, but I'm just saying, in general, we have to be like honest. So he says, "Shema to Amer Hare Masinu Sheki Yavu Chachmamim Bekol Mikom Vashi Veish Mor Adam Et Asmod Shemira." So it says like this. So it says, perhaps you will say, "Behold, we see the sages everywhere obligated. We see every obligated a man to guard himself well and to not put himself in danger, even if he is a righteous person with many merits. For instance, everything is in the hands of the heavens except colds and heart heat strokes." Okay, what does that mean? The Torah says he shall guard you shall guard yourself very carefully. It says in Deuteronomy. Hence one should not decide to trust in God in all situations and in the Talmud Yushalmi. He says in Brachot, he says they say even when performing a mitzvah. Ad ki yesh yira'ah ve'ishta yira'ah ish yira'ah. So he says, know that there is fear and there is fear. There is justified fear and there is foolish fear. In God and there is recklessness. Ki hine ha'adon baruch hu asa et ha'adam ba'al shechal nekon unevara nekocha. So he says, and the Lord blessed he has made man with sound, excellent, and clear reasoning, in order that he may guide himself in the right way and guard from harmful things, which were created to punish the wicked. Umi Yisrael Shelo Yeni Echeg Asmod Varek Ha Pakir Asmo. Okay, so he says, but someone who does not guide, who want to guide himself in excellence, in an excellent manner, and exposes himself to danger. This is not trust in God, but rather foolishness. Such a person sins in that he is acting against the will of God, who desires that a man guards himself. Ve'nimsa Shemil Mada Hasachana Hamuta Ba'at Ba'daver Asherhu. So he says, hence, besides the inherent danger which is exposing himself to due to failing to guard himself properly, he also actively brings punishment down upon himself for the sin in which he commits. Jeez. He says, thus the sin itself is what brings upon the punishment. Ve'ulam hash emiriya hazod vezod ha'yirah. The type of fear and guarding of oneself which is appropriate is that which is based on the guidance of wisdom and reason. He says on this scripture says every man sees the evil and escapes, but the fool continues and is punished. So what does it mean to guard oneself? Right? That's like a big thing because we grow up in a society of consumerism, right? Where it's all about the consumer and what you can buy and this. It's like, and especially like as an African American, it's like we have no guarding on what comes into our. We just believe whatever the FDA says, whatever we get, the public school, we just believe, right? And so the food that has come into our community has been just terrible, right? The hygiene, the preparation of the food, the food itself, the type of meat, the slaughtering, all these things, right? Just terrible, right? And then we look at the content, the entertainment content, the movies, the TV shows, the music videos, like no guarding, right? There's no guard that says like, no, that cannot come into my life. That cannot come into my house. That cannot. Not. Don't get me wrong. There's parents that have done that. I remember like back when I did that, like that concert I did in Kansas City. I remember it was the first time I ever had this experience. We went to some college that was close in the area where where we're going to do the event at or whatever. And so I just remember giving a flyer to a girl. It was like flyer Ludacris. I mean, Ludacris at the time was like really big, you know. And long story short, um, long story short, this girl took the flyer and she looked at it and she was like, "Why would I ever come to something like this?" And I'm like, "What do you mean it's ludicrous?" And she's like, I don't listen to this type of music. Like I would never listen to this type of music. This is like the filth." And I was like, what? And that was like my introduction to the Bible Belt. You know what I'm saying? Of America. Like I was like, wow. Like I never could imagine an African American girl saying this to me about Ludacris or any, you know what I mean? Like being coming from the music space at that time. Anyways, but so there's people that do have these guards. There's communities that do, but I'm saying that even those communities are dealing with these things now, right? So guarding is a big thing, right? And the foolish fear is when a man wants to add the foolish fear is when a man wants to add protection upon protection and fear upon fear. Um, um, was it that divesting and precautions and for his precautions in such a way that it results in neglect of Torah studying divine study. So whatever, it's like these, I don't know, like I don't know, it's people that they lack amuna, they lack amuna. והקלל עליה וכינה בין שתיה העיר או תומה שכלכו chachamim. So he said the general principle to distinguish between the two types of fear is is as our sages specify saying, where harm is likely, it is different. Ki makom shechachazech masui ve'noda. So he says, and for in a place where harm is likely and foreseeable, it is proper to guard oneself. But in a place where there is no danger, one should not fear. So you're going to something interesting. So I remember a story. Like I was going on the Temple Mount one day. This is a while ago, maybe months ago. I don't know how long ago. But anyways, so you have to walk up these steps because you're walking from the bottom. You got to walk up these it's like a whole incline. God willing, you'll have to walk one day. But you walk up, and so at this time, it was all these police officers up there, all these security people. It's a very high security type situation, right? Which is a sad thing that Jews have to have security to walk up on the Temple Mount. But anyways, but the point is like this. So we were walking upstairs, and on the two sides of the place that you're walking up, there's benches, so there's people sitting sometimes. A lot of people could sit there if they had to, type of thing, right? But the thing is like this. So this particular day, there was a bunch of cops there, but they were mostly all girls, and they were sitting on both sides. So you had to walk like basically like through this whole stream of girls. So one of the guys comes up to me. He's all the guy because these are really religious guys that go to the Temple Mount. Like these aren't the regular Jews. These are like B'nai Aliyah guys, right? They're just at a very high level of light. And so anyways, Bekitzer, he says to me, he says like this. He said, "Grab your seat, grab your seat." And he's like putting my hand like by, so I take out my seat and I just grab it. He says, anytime you walk between two women, you have to walk through women. A man has to grab a seat or he could lose some of his Torah. Now I've heard this before. I read this before, right? And it was just so interesting that he just said that. And so, anyways, because the point is saying guarding yourself. And he says, you know, you got to be smart. I mean, it is, you have to guard yourself, and then you also have to, not create things that don't exist, right? Like, so if you see yourself walking and there's going to be a group of girls there and you don't want to walk through them, Okay, you want to grab your seat, right? But you don't have to say, because there's a chance that there could be girls there, I'm not going to go to the hard it. You know what I'm saying? So it says, Ve'al kayotse baze na'amar. So he says, on a similar to this, the sages say, we do not assume any defect without cause, says in Coolin. A judge, it says about Babatro, I'm going to say, he says, and a judge need be guided by only that which his eye sees, right? So not looking for these things that don't exist, like fantasy world, right? He says, which itself is the intent of the verses we brought earlier. And he says, the clever man sees the evil that hides inside, it hides the evil. He says, the clever man sees evil and hides himself, which states only about escaping from evil, that one can see not the evil which happens. Okay, so he says, which states only about the escaping the evil that one can see, not of the evil which perhaps, that's what I just said, perhaps possibly may occur, right? So it's like, and I know guys like this too. Some guys get so like, and this is my opinion, overly religious, that they fall into this trap where they just can't do anything. Like I used to live in the area of Yasharim. They didn't want to leave the area. Like, I mean, that square mile area is like, if they did not want to see anyone who was not from, right? And it is a shock too. Like when you leave where I grew up, right? Where I started at here in Israel, if it is a shock, like going into like regular mainstream, right? Even now, you see me wear like a blue shirt and a red tie. I would never be able to wear that there. You know what I mean? It's only black and white. So I sometimes it could go overboard. Vehu mamash inaina ha pekut shehiz kareti lemi la'a. He says, Amar Asel Shechala Vadarek. So he says, this is precisely like the verse brought earlier. The lazy man says, there is a lion in the way. Our sages of blessed memory illustrated in successful decree to what extent unfounded fear can cause a person to refrain from doing good deeds, as it says in the Midrashim. He says, Ve'amar, it says Devarim Rabbah. So he says, in Shlomo said 7 things regarding the lazy man to illustrate. Ve'amar le'atzel hare Rabbah echad ba'ir. So he says, they say to the lazy man, your teacher is in the city. Go and learn from him. Vehu Mesiv Otam. And he says, and he replied, I'm afraid of the lion on the road. Rabbaeka Batok Hamid Na. She says, your teacher is in the neighborhood. Omar Lechem, he replies, I'm afraid that he may be between the paths. Omrim lo. He says, he is in your building. He says, Omer le. He replies to them, if I go to him, I may find the door locked. See there. Ha lemad ta. And he says, we learn from here that if it is not the fear that causes him to be lazy, but rather the opposite. The laziness caused the fear, right? And everybody deals with this with mitzvahs because there's a Satan that doesn't want us to do the mitzvah. And we have to overcome that Satan. So he's not trying to teach the Kabbalah openly, right? But he's saying to you, he's saying there's a malach that's there that convinces us, that wants to woo us into like not. I'm telling you, I almost didn't go to the Temple Mount today. It's unbelievable levels, right? I almost didn't go. Oh, I could do this. Maybe I'll go later on. I know I'm having a great conversation. All these things went through my head. וכל הדברים האלה מעניס יוד היומים יעיד. He says, and he says, everyday experience can testify on the truth of these things, as such conduct is evident and widespread amongst the masses of people whose ways are folly. It says in Tehillim, one who thinks that this matter will find the absolute truth and knowledge will come readily to understand to the understanding person. Ukevar nita ba'ar ma'ina haziri zuda be'ur. So he says, I have already clarified the matter of zeal to the extent that I deem will suffice to arouse one's heart. The wise man will become wiser and increase in understanding. And he says, and it seems that it is proper for the proper step of zeal to follow up after the step of watchfulness. For generally, a man will not be zeal if he was not first watchful in his deeds. One should one who does not put one who does not put to heart to be cautious in his deeds, nor to contemplate the divine service and its principles, which which constitutes the traits of watchfulness. As I wrote, will find it very difficult to don love and yearning for the service of God and to be zealous with the passion for the Creator. So he said he's giving us a blueprint, right? He's giving us a blueprint on how to elevate in levels in our life. And he's saying the entry level is watchfulness. A person has a person obviously has to accept the Torah and be busy with it and say, hey, I know that this is my thing, right? Now we're talking about going to superstar level, right? Superstar level is that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is over above my head. So that means every room that I walk into, the Shekhinah is doing all the work. It's protecting me from harm. It's bringing me only that's good. Is on a physical level, it gives me strength. It makes sure that I'm healthy. It makes sure my family's healthy. It makes sure my family's protected. Everybody who's under the Shekhinah of the husband is protected, even the family, right? And the person has to know that when they daven, that they're bringing down the Shekhinah into their house, and that divine presence is on the wife of their wife of their future children, of their current children, the wife's family, their family, but they have to have that in mind that every day they're bringing down the light for them because they're the leader, they're the head of the tribe. Okay, so he says like this. So he's saying, so if a person goes through this, they're going to get to zeal. Ki hine hu odenu tova ba'avot hagufini yot. So he says like this. He says, for such a person is still drowning in bodily desires and running in the momentum of his habits, which distance him away from all of this. But after he has opened his eyes to see his deeds, which been watchful to them, made the account of the mitzvahs against the sins we mentioned. It will be easy for him to turn from evil and to long for good and to be zealous in it. This is evidence. Okay, so that's chapter 9, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. So any thoughts on that?
Powerful,
Yeah.
powerful. Laying out the steps, you know, making it very practical how to achieve these levels that we need, that we're obligated to get to. So, I was thinking about it yesterday actually. Sometimes I don't know, imagination's an amazing thing, Baruch Hashem. But I was for some reason I can't remember why, but I was walking and I was thinking like, what would the I can't remember the Hebrew term for it, but the priest before they go out to war, like what would he say to the men? Like he would tell them, whoever has fear, go back. And I was
Yeah.
really thinking about that, like what fear would it be? It's not fear of the fear isn't like you have this fear of the enemy. You have this fear. It's not because of what you see. It's because of your actions, your deeds. You're not allowing the Shekinah to protect you. I was really thinking about this walking yesterday. I was like, like how important it is. And then like I was reading Rabbi Shalom Arush's Garden of Knowledge. I was
Mm,
explaining like, people have irrational fears of snakes or mice or dogs or cats or whatever. And it's just Hashem's way of letting man know how small we truly are.
mm,
Like it's a reminder of your fertility. It's a reminder that when you don't have the divine image on you, when you're not walking with Hashem, then you're scared of everything. The wind, a leaf blows, it terrifies you. In the African American community, they tell you ain't living right. If your
mm,
phone ring and you jump, you ain't living right. What's going on?
mm.
But it's real. You have these irrational fears. What I mean, because you're not connected to the kedusha. That fear that you have, it's the nakedness that you feel. You're naked. In a sense. So, the zeal. Watchfulness leads to zeal. That's if you're mindful of every single action that you're doing, of everything, and why, and weighing out, okay, why am I doing this? What's the separation? What's going to happen? Are you afraid of, fear of you're gonna lose your property? Okay, that's one level. It's a lower level, but it's still good. Are you afraid that you're gonna separate yourself from Hashem? Okay, now we're going up a little bit. So it's just being mindful of what you're doing and why you're doing it and what's driving you to do it. If you know this isn't good for you, why are you doing it? You're under attack. Yes, however. But in reality, it's giving you the opportunity to overcome that situation. So, it's the knowledge that we need to overcome these situations that we face, that we go through. So, yeah, Baruch Hashem.
So this is the thing. Yesterday I mentioned. So on Wednesdays, I have this thing right at 16, right after you.
Mm,
So we always do a little bit short. But the thing is, we did a little bit short yesterday just because it was a crazy day. So if you want to do something later on this evening, we can.
mm-hmm.
We could do HaYasher or something like that later on.
Yeah.
So,
Give me the
so
time.
we, yeah, so do whatever. I mean, just send me a message. When you have free time. You know what I'm saying?
So you're 8 hours. So that would
Yeah.
be okay. Yeah, I'll just shoot you something like you see me in 4. Yeah, yeah. I'll just shoot you something on WhatsApp and
Just hit me. Yeah, just hit me.
yeah.
But I apologize, but I just remember I have them at 16.
No, sorry, good.
All right. Anyways, Shem should accept our tefillah. Baruch